Soul ties and generational curses. Speaking on this subject, we often hear the Christianized, and when I say Christianized, I mean like the generic version of what soul ties are and how to break them. And we'll often mention people breaking generational curses by simply going to college, getting a good job, or whatever the case may be. But today I want to tackle this subject from a Hebraic standpoint, what a Hebraic twist. I think one of the things that throws people off when I bring this subject up is that, you have more than one type of soul tie. Most people equate soul tie with a spouse or a marriage partner or maybe someone that they've had sexual intercourse with. And I get why. That was the first biblical soul tie. Let's take it back to Genesis. Yah says that which was one became two to become one again. Well, that don't sound like some binding to me. I don't know what it is. So we know that Adam and Eve were tied. They had the first soul tie. But within soul ties, sometimes you can have breaches or disconnects, so to speak. Things become loosened. I need you to keep this in mind when we start talking about the bad soul ties, because right now we're talking about the good soul ties. Now, there was a breach apparently somewhere in the soul tie between Eve and Adam, because we see that the enemy came to steal, kill, and destroy. And we all know how that story played out, and everyone gives their own interpretation or commentary. We're not going to do that. We know how the story played out with Adam and Eve and the serpent. Once the soul tie between those two were breached, then you see the generational curses come into play immediately afterwards. And this is why I'm including both in this video: soul ties and generational curses, or you can call them familiar spirits, because they run almost hand in hand. From the first time we see the first righteous soul tie, we see a breach, and then we see generational curses. And then from the generational curses, what do we get? The familiar spirits. And if you stick around to the end, you're going to find out whether or not it's actually possible to break soul ties, both righteous and unrighteous, according to the word. We also read the verse that what Yah has put together, let no man tear apart. And when you start speaking on a soul, we're talking about will, conscious, subconscious, mission, intellect, communication, desire, memory. All of these things are hardwired into your soul. And when you share that with someone, depending on what type of soul you are, what type of vessel you are, you either become joined as a follower or joined as a leader and or head. So once the soul tie between Eve and Adam was broken, we don't really know how Adam felt. We can only speculate. Did he know instantly what had happened when it happened, though he was not there? And did he consider it or hold it to be his fault? Was he responsible? Well, we knew that he was responsible for Eve. He was her head. And in certain situations, when you're leading people, if they don't make it home, then you don't make it home either. Did he wear that on him? And is this why we read that he wasn't beguiled? Eve was. Adam knew very well what he was doing. Would he have lived on with survivor's guilt? And you need to ask yourself this, because when it comes to our homes, our children, you, the listener, are somewhat of an Adam. In your home, your children or those around you are like Eve. And being that they are entrusted to your care, are you picking up on the telltale signs? Have you made their mission getting into the kingdom your mission by all means necessary, even if it costs you your life? Do you even have that kind of love in you? The tragedy with Adam and Eve was that it didn't stop with them. When the breach was made, and I'm sure they repaired it because they stayed together, but then it went to the children by way of generational curses. And here we are again, the firstborn, Cain. Yah's questioning him, hey, where's your brother? What does Cain say? The famous, or shall I say infamous line, I don't know, am I thou brother's keeper? And the truth is, for Cain, you are. You are your brother's keeper, as am I, as are you, the listener. You are your sister's keeper. You are your wife's keeper. You are your husband's keeper. You are your son's keeper. You are your daughter's keeper. See, the devil knows that if he can break the family, then nothing can stand thee. You understand? So from the start, that's been his mission goal, to attack that soul tie. The soul tie between man and woman, then the soul tie between father and son, then the soul tie between mother and daughter, then the soul tie between sibling on sibling. I don't understand why people think that some of these things are just off limits for him. It's not, it doesn't work like that. Nothing's been withheld from him, though he's been kicked out of the kingdom. He attacks righteous institutions, he attacks righteous soul ties, and then swaps them out for the unrighteous soul tie. He has the believer and even unbeliever believing that the unrighteous soul tie should not be broken, while the righteous soul tie can easily just be thrown away when someone is good and ready. But this isn't so, ladies and gentlemen. Again, because what Yah has put together, let no man tear apart. That lets us know that if you put man and woman together in order so that they can create a family and familiar bonds, not familiar spirits, it was never in his goal for us to be without that there, without these soul ties. But we're so accustomed now to the unrighteous soul ties because it started at home. The righteous soul ties had breaches. Maybe you came up in a home where the righteous soul tie between you and your father was corrupted, or maybe you and your mother, or maybe both. Maybe you came up in a home where you didn't even know the soul tie, what that felt like having a dad. Maybe you didn't know your real dad. There's a breach there. From the moment you find out you didn't know your real dad, there's a breach that you didn't even know that you had. Same thing with your mother. What if you had sibling rivalry at its finest? There's a breach in that soul tie. A lot of us even have the soul ties of having a sexual experience with our parents or our guardians or whomever is supposed to be guarding us. You see how the devil took a soul tie that was supposed to be righteous, stripped it of its righteousness, and made it anything but, and then left that with you? He's always going to start at home, ladies and gentlemen, with husband and wife first. In your spare time, you start to trace your generational curses, and you see that there's always a common motif. There's always a husband and wife, or man and woman involved. Either both are implicit or one's complicit, and the other one sits back and kind of just allows this behavior to be exhibited, which then makes them also complicit. Just keep tracing. And see, through the generations, this is how you get the familiar spirits, because these familiar spirits are like assorted flavors, and they are attracted to certain types or even bloodlines. And these spirits, whether it be anger, bitterness, rage, pride, prostitution, alcoholism, addiction, substance abuse of all sorts, murder, sexual perversion, gambling, and the list goes on and on. These spirits seem to attach themselves to familiar vessels. See, the longer they've been attributed and associated with your bloodline, the more familiar they are. This is what makes them familiar. And the longer they've been attached, the harder it is to break. You got to think about it now. If this one particular spirit has been in your family for generations, wouldn't it know exactly where to hide, where to reside, when to hold and when to fold? Ask yourself, would you have an easier time hiding in a mansion you've been in for 20 plus years versus a mansion you've been in for 20 hours? That answer is a no-brainer. And so when you get to our generation and you see that the familiar spirit is so strong, you have to understand that with every generation, these things seem to intensify. They grow in strength because their strength is the familiarization of you. Add to the fact that Solomon already said that there's nothing new up under the sun. These spirits since the days of Genesis have had time to practice, not practicing to get it right, but they practice so much that they can't get it wrong. They practice so much that they cannot get it wrong. And they bank on that. So when you look around and you see that first, the families and the communities are broken up, I can almost shortly tell you that the marriages are in shambles. if there is any marriages. And then by default, I can also tell you that the children, you see where I'm going with this. So what do you find yourself needing to be loosened from an unrighteous soul tie? Well, let's consult the word. First, we are told, what you bound on earth, that is a tie, by the way. Let be bound in heaven, what you loose on earth, let be loosed in heaven. So I ask you, the listener, have you simply asked to be released of this tie? And not just asking, but in the name, in the authority of Yahshua. And if your answer is yes, and there still has nothing to be done, well, did you do the second part? Because you know when you pray, there's two parts, yeah? See, the first part is actually saying the prayer. That there may be the easiest part. The second part, though simple, is not that easy for most people. The second part is you have to believe. You know many people pray, and the moment they stop praying, they get up with a face of trepidation or skepticism, or, you know, when I get out of prayer about anything, I automatically go into thanking him. Because he's already done it. He's already paved the way. He's already made the way. I'm just slow getting there. I just haven't found the path. So all the answers are laid out in his word. I don't want to read the word. Why don't I want to read the word? Hey, because along this journey, there are some emotions and some energies that I have to shake. Maybe I have to forgive a couple of people, because maybe I caused a few unrighteous soul ties myself. Or maybe I had to forgive because, you know, what the word says, the only way to pray, Yahshua says, is forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sinned against us. But you, the listener, you can't do that, right? One of the spirits that you may deal with is some of the hardest, and that is self-denial, right? Maybe it's self-righteousness. That's a hard one too. You've become comfortable with being angry. You become comfortable with, well, I had a reason to. They did this, that's different. You become very comfortable with that. See, you know you have something wrong when you tell yourself something happens to you, oh, I have to be mad. If I'm not mad, then something's wrong with me. I need to be upset. I need to act out. If I don't be mad about this, then there has to be something wrong with me. You know, you get somewhat comfortable with being bitter. You get somewhat comfortable with being angry. Hate to admit it. May never be able to admit it. But you are kind of comfortable there. You're comfortable with being hurt. You're comfortable with being a victim. That's fine for you. Because in your mind, now you have a free pass of justification to do everything the word tells you not to do. And if you find yourself on that path, I can almost assuredly tell you, you will never get rid of those soul ties. Ever. Because before you can even ask him to just loose it, you have to stop sinning first. For we are told that he hears not the prayers of sinners. And what is sin? Sin is the transgression of the law. You're breaking his commandments. Like you broke some righteous soul ties. So you're going to have to get yourself in working order before you submit to heaven a work in order. And already that may be too much for you to do. But if it's not, let us proceed. Let's say that you are now in working order. You've, asked the Father, simply just asked him, because, Yahshua is just asking, you shall receive, for you to break this soul tie in the name of Yahshua and in the authority of Yahshua, and it still has not gotten broken. Then I tell you to consult the brethren. Reach out. That's what the assembly is here for. Do you know other believers? Assuming that you are a believer yourself, do you know other believers that you can just say something, brother, I need help? We know that when two or more are gathered, you know that verse, You're already establishing a claim there. And this is from people gathered, family in Mashiach. Could you imagine if this was your actual blood and kinfolk? But let's be honest, most of us don't know any familiar kinfolk, DNA-wise, that thumps like we do, that believes like we do. You see how great the devil has done his job? Don't get me wrong, I love the body of Mashiach. I love all the assorted flavors we come in. But when we originally started this thing, Israel was a family sharing DNA, knowing that they share DNA. Today, we are a family with little to no DNA in common. Imagine the strength we could have had when you had not just spirit, but blood, praying in the blood of Yahshua against these things. The devil knows how powerful that would be. That's why he attacks it so ferociously and keeps you away from having your own family so that the saga can continue. Understand this here. When you finally do make it to your brethren, right? Your keeper, your guardian, those that we are charged over, those who are charged over you. Like angels have certain charges over people, like in Psalms 91. But when you call these people up, you know, your brother's keepers or this keeper, whomever, and you guys are there praying to have this soul tie loosed, understand that you will need to have all the 7 spirits of the Lord present. You can go read about that in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. And if you don't have these 7 spirits already on you or in you or around you, I would not advise you attempt to remove this soul tie or break the soul tie. You may end up unsuccessful, and as a result, you may end up discouraged, and you may never try to be encouraged to do it again. Kill it, and kill it right the first time, no matter how painful. My philosophy is, die once, cry once, be free forever. Unrighteous soul ties, like any disease, really strikes through transmission, contamination. You have been in contact. You have been touched. Now, this could be physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, but maybe all of the above. But you had yourself tied to or with something, inadvertently or advertently. And there are people today who have soul ties with people they've never met. You know, there are people who have soul ties to Beyonce, have never met her, but just feel so connected to her. They cry when they see her. They cry when she comes into a room. They cry when she leaves. They pass out. She can bring them to heights without even physically touching them. Which brings me to the next soul tie. There are people who have soul ties with porno actresses and actors who can be brought to climax better than their partner could do in the person in the flesh. If that ain't a soul tie, I don't know what is. They're not even touching you physically, but they're touching you. For those who have watched the Twilight series, you know there was a part made where I believe it was with Jake, the werewolf, who had imprinted on Bella's daughter. You know biblically what I would call that? Yeah, you guessed it. A soul tie. The trip part is that this movie is dealing with all types of demonology, and even in their creed, they have to honor it. This is why Bella's so upset. She understands what the soul tie means, and it's with a little baby who hasn't even matured yet. Let you know that they don't care how old your seed, born or unborn, is when they go after them. There's only but one name and authority that can break that soul tie. And you're gonna have to ask in the name and in authority of Yahshua HaMashiach, that the Father loose whatever has been bound unto you. In the same way, you have what's called a binder, and there's pieces of loose paper. They all come together inside your binder, and when you clip those rings together, now they are officially binded. But guess what? When you try to unlatch the bind, you realize you cannot do it sometimes with just one hand. You need 2. Think about that. That is all you have to do to loose whatever has been attached to you, if it is an unrighteous soul tie. What about the loosing of a righteous soul tie? How do you break those? And when I say righteous, I'm talking about not righteous from your standpoint, righteous from what he had instituted from the jump, right? So the soul ties of the family. Let's say you want to break your soul ties to your earthly father. You really can't break that. The only thing that you can do, according to the word, is to honor thy father and thy mother. You will forever be tied to them because you came from them and even sometimes through them. Those are your parents. that He's seen fit to give you for whatever reason. And we can go down the list of, well, they're this and they're that, and guess what? Get in line. Because you know what? I was the same way. And when I got older and I came out of Babylon, you know what I realized about my parents? They too were victims. And the thing about knowing that is that you have to be okay if they never figured that out. Because if they never figured that out, they may never seen or realize how they have victimized you in turn. And you're going to have to lean on His peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding. And that is the only way you'll be able to honor that soul tie with you and your parents. But in doing so, your days will be lengthened. It's the only commandment that I've seen that comes with the promise. What if you are trying to break a soul tie with an ordinance of marriage? Maybe you were married to someone before. This one may be even harder to get around than the issue with the soul ties of the parents. Simply because before there were parents, there was marriage. So this is the first soul tie. And sometimes when you're trying to break the first, you're gotta go through the worst. When you read the scriptures of Yah saying, what He has put together, let no man tear apart, that which was two became one, you are going up against an ordinance of heaven. That's a big mountain to climb. You cannot break that soul tie, but you can forfeit it. You can give it up. We've seen these clauses in the Bible, the same reason why Moses allowed divorce. Yahshua tells us that this was never the intention. But of course, we as men, we don't care about Yah's intent. We only care about what we want. And right now, we want this soul tie to be broken from us because it's just getting in the way. You just forfeit it. Just give it up. And I'll tell you this here, results do vary. There are some things that you'll do in life that though you may get healing and counseling for, you will forever have to live with. If you get shot in the leg, you shoot yourself in the leg, they can heal it. But when it rains, there's a good chance you may feel it. You have to live with that. You go out here and you commit a murder or whatever, right? During the court and the trial proceedings, you repent. I'm sure Yah would forgive you if it was a true repentance. But you may still find yourself behind bars for the rest of your days. As a constant reminder. Sometimes it's how it is with soul ties when you're dealing with marriage. Especially if it was a biblical marriage. And it doesn't matter if both partners don't agree that it was a biblical marriage. We know that the unbelieving is sanctified by the believing, so therefore, under heaven, it still counts. So if you are an adherent who is trying to free yourself from a soul tie that had anything to do with a biblical ordinance, there is no breaking of that. There's only forfeiture. And when you walk away, and when you give it up, understand that you may still see remnants of that there. Because he who is in thee is stronger than he who is in the world. So when we start talking about influences, dreams, he is the first person who says he will cause you to dream dreams. He will cause you to see visions. The devil mimics that. Overall, I tell you all, be mindful of who you tie yourself to. Some ties are very hard to break, and some ties are never meant to be broken to begin with. Hope this lesson was enlightening, revealing. Father, we thank you. We thank you in all things. You all have a blessed evening. Selah.